The first ones who built it, as we said, were the Maccabees, this Jewish sovereign state of the 2nd century to the mid-1st century BC. And then it was taken by Herod and completely was rebuilt. What Herod built here was a wall that sort of goes all around. We saw it when we entered through here. This is the snake trail, and this is where we entered the castle. And then he built other, could we move a little bit to open up the circle here? Right. Another thing that he built around here, which is very impressive, is there are 2 palaces here. The southern palace and the northern palace. The northern palace is the most sort of private of all. It has 3 steps, and we're going to visit it, and warehouses and a bathhouse. So he brought all the luxury and all the what you have to have in a wealthy sort of Roman culture-based place. He had more public fair sort of place there. He built a huge, we talked about the fact that his family was trapped here with no water and almost died. As a result, he built an enormous water system. We're going to see it when we are on the other side of the mountain. That he had so many water here, he could sort of swim in it, and he did. He built a semi-Olympic swimming pool all the way on the southern part. No joke, it's right out there. Now, the whole idea behind it, you have to take into account, we don't even know how much time he spent here, if at all. We know that he was here, but, you know, it wasn't the place he would hang out with, right? It's a very sort of complicated message that is being conveyed by these places, because there are several of those throughout the country. One is might, wealth, power, right? Don't mess with me, I'm so rich, powerful, I can afford this nonsense out here. But another sort of the other side of it is there's all these places were meant to be, and this is why they were constructed, as a refuge. A place for him to run to in times of danger, because he was always on the guard for people to topple him, to come after him. And it happened more than once, so he was paranoid, but he had his reasons, right? And there is a dual message here, right? One is of wealth and power and might, and the other one is of a great vulnerability. I don't have to build walls around myself if I'm fully confident in who I am and where I am. But he was never really liked by the Romans and trusted by the Romans, and the Jews saw in him somebody that brought to an end 90 years of Jewish independence in the land of Israel. The fact that they lost it themselves before him is something that was very easy to forget, because they started to fight each other. The last few years of this Jewish independent state, they were more busy attacking each other than anything else. Eventually they would call in the Romans, kind of. And so this is very easy to forget, but him, as somebody that was not of this family or dynasty of kings of the Hashmonaim, he was himself not, they did not agree to even recognize him as a Jew because his mother was pagan. Did we mention this? His mother was pagan. His father, or his grandfather, was one of those who converted forcefully. It was the only occasion during this period in the 2nd century BC when Jews forcefully, like in a sword point, sort of make people convert, and he did. And he became a Jew, but he also became an advisor to one of the last of the kings of the Maccabees, and he started to push his sons to positions of power, and one of them, as in grandsons, and one of them was Herod. And Herod was the most ambitious, the most sort of kind of brutal and completely, and he was very, very clever as well. He knew the Romans very well. The Roman had a system. They brought in the elite of the provinces, the sons of the elite of the provinces, to be educated in Rome. And he spent a lot of his time growing up back in Rome. And by that, the Romans achieved two goals. First, when you're holding the dearest thing to the king of the province, you are reducing the chances that he will rebel against you, right? The other thing is that you're educating the next generation of leadership throughout the empire on your values. So the next generation will be much closer to where you want them to be. So he was one of these elites, sons of the elite that was brought up in Rome. This is where he made all these political sort of connections with Mark Antony, with Brutus. This would be very, very beneficial or effective in gaining power here, because when he comes back, he's actually taking the country using Roman troops and assistance to take out the country. And when he takes the entire country, he becomes semi-independent. He's fully dependent on Romans, but he's so clever, he becomes so rich and so powerful in, you know, local sort of standards, that he starts to play his cards very skillfully in Rome. And he maneuvers, and, you know, he goes around and he finds places to sort of, and he builds here something that was never out here. Something very powerful, very important. One of the major projects out of which he made the money to make was the Temple Mountain in Jerusalem. We talked about it, but also Caesarea. He figures out that there is a lot of trade traffic that is going on between the Egyptian Empire to the south and the Greek and the Roman empires to the north. And this trade traffic can go on land, and the easiest way is through here, through the land of Israel, to the coastal line mostly. But it could also cross by ship, by sea. But then back then you don't go straight line. You don't sail from Alexandria up to Greece or to Rome. You have to sail along the shoreline. And this takes you on the shoreline of Israel. So he builds a huge port to bring in this traffic. He makes a fortune out of it. He's all over. He's building places. He's very active. And so when he builds this place, it's to serve as a refuge, but it's being done in a way. This is one period, one story that we have here. 70 years after he's gone, so he dies in the year 4 BC. His 3 surviving sons, who were not murdered by him, are dividing the country between themselves, but the Romans don't really trust them. They're not as big as he was, they're not as skillful as he was, and they're gradually losing it, and the Romans start to send governors that would control the country directly. One of them, maybe the most famous, is Pilate. Pilate has his term here from between 26 to 36. And then they're controlling the country directly. And in 66, the Jews rebel against them. We're having the other story of this place. The Zealots are surprise attacking a Roman force that was here. They're taking the castle. They're doing very little sort of physical or material changes to the place. They just do small amendments to fit it so the place would fit their needs. One of them is to take an area in between the walls, right here, that in Herod's time was a stable. We're going to see what he needed the stable here for. And they're turning it into the synagogue. And the bathhouse, we're going to see a small space where they built into the very luxurious bathhouse, small bath. This is what they need. And they live here for 7 or 8 years. The revolt is being suppressed. The Romans are sending the 10th legion to come around. They're capturing all the towns around them, all the castles, including on the other side, Mechvar, and then they're moving over here. And this is the other story of this place, the story of this clash between these two civilizations. You know, this place was recognized as a World Heritage Center by UNESCO, by the UN. I'm not sure because of the Jewish aspect of it. It's the Roman, you can here see the best, a Roman siege system. And you can see the determination, and you can see the way they ran. I mean, the Romans, in many ways, are really the foundations of much of the civilization, as you know, the emperors that we know today. The governance, the technology sort of driven society, all those. And when they're coming here, they're building this huge siege system that stands out there. The camps, if you open the protocol of the Roman Empire, the drawings that you see there is like one-to-one what you see out there. Nothing is left to chance. They're all working by the protocol. And up here, so this is the Roman Empire down there with all the values that it represents. And up here, a group of 961 Jewish zealots, men, women, you know, and this clash between, and they are coming completely from a different place, right? Going to a different place, coming from a different place. And this clash between these two civilizations is really the story of this place. And it's very sort of vivid here because you can actually see the place where the wall was breached and where they were fighting over control over this opening until the Jews lose this place. Everything around us is from Herod's time. There is one exception for that, and this is this small church up there. This is a church that was built here in the Byzantine era, 5th, 6th centuries, by a group of monks who made this place their home. We're talking about 30 monks living in caves around. and they built this church as their center. They would gather here Sunday, get supplies before they retreat back to their caves around where they were. And they were here for about 200 years. And we find some, besides of the church, we find some signs of their presence here. For example, the water system that they would build here is of enormous scale. They built into it something much smaller that would suit their needs. So there are some evidence for their presence here as well. And then at the 7th century, there is this big quiet being, so like a curtain being driven over this place. Nobody's visiting this place for almost 12 or 1300 years. This stands like that out here until the 40s. In the 40s we talked about it. The Zionist movement, the Jews are looking desperately for sort of places they could go to get inspired, and they're finding this place. And they're telling the story in a way that should sort of persuade us to take the same measures of these people. See this as an act of bravery, act of determination, act of... I was being brought here as a kid, 13, 12, you know, it wasn't said like that, but the message was clear, like, this is what we expect you to do. Now, the interesting thing is that what we knew back then is exactly what we know right now. It's not that we learn more things. Josephus was available for us back then, and we read it back then. The excavations here in the 60s gave us all the details that we needed and we still have today. But the way we're looking at the story today is somewhat different. We're talking first thing about who were these zealots, and we talked already about the Jewish society back then being very fragmented. There are many groups. There's a lot of social unrest. We talked about the Isiim, the priests working the temple. We talked about the masses, the priests that were spread around and were completely disconnected from the elite. And we have this fourth group. We talked about the fact that were Sikais, dagger, and they would go around, assassinate their political rivals, and they were pushing to this revolt. There are many that are saying, you know, we have no chance of succeeding in this revolt. It will bring a disaster on us. We should lower our heads and let it pass. But no, they're pushing very hard into this revolt, and then they're retreating over here, and so we're talking now about who they were, about what happened here. Do we call it really a suicide, or is it more like, you know, who was asked, who was not asked? So it's not, some years ago it was condemned altogether. Now it's like more balanced. We're saying, you know, it can be really judged in today's sort of standards. It's a different period, different, and there is what's to admire in it. There is something that, you know, we don't have to copy everything. So the message today is somewhat different, and the interesting thing is that it tells you about the Israeli society of today versus what it was 30, 40 years ago. Because nothing in the facts was changed. It's just the way we read it today has changed, because we have changed. So there is some 30, 40 years ago, I'll be able to point to you a grave. They didn't find skeletons up here. Probably the Romans piled them up and burned them. But when they excavated the place, they found 25 skeletons in a cave on the southern slope, and 3 more at the northern palace. In the 60s, they brought it to formal military burial ceremony out here. They used to bring the tank divisions to be sworn into the army here. They're not doing it anymore. So, shows you about, you know, how we read it today is a bit different than where we did back then. So the way we want to visit the mountain is we're going to walk through, visit this very ancient church, and then cross over to the place the Romans breached the wall. At the top of the ramp. We're going to see how they did it over there. And then we're going to walk along the wall here, see some of the spaces in between the walls, and visit the synagogue that was also built into the wall. Then we're going to walk a little bit further down here to take a look at the water system that Herod built to the mountain. And then we're going to visit the palace, the upper balcony, and then the warehouses. And then we're going to go back to the cable car and drive down, or take it down. We're going to have lunch here. And then we're going to have a special treat. Usually we don't do this, but they have a great museum here that it's